Welcome back to Opening the Composer's Workshop. Today I'll be doing something which is rather closer to what the composer does than what I was doing when I was doing the technical work on Sadie Harrison's new piece. Because today I'm going to work with a piece which I sort of know, which is Nigel Clarke's new version of his Epitaph for Edith Cavell in a version for viola. This is a piece which I played many times on the violin, it was written for me. So what's interesting about this is I'm going to work through it and see what is different. What does transferring it to the viola, what does his new version teach me about the piece? What do I learn about the viola? And what are the technical procedures I'll have to adopt in order to make it work, to explore it on the instrument? I'm working with this extraordinary Jacob Raymond viola from 1641. And first of all, I will just play it through. I'll put the score up on the screen while I do that. So this is not a first read, of course, because I already know the piece, but I don't know the piece. So it's exploring something I knew. It's exploring something I know in a new environment, if you like. Nigel and I discussed what kind of mute we should use for this piece and came to the conclusion that it worked best with a wooden mute. The mute I was just trying, this little bright red rubber one, so you heard, slightly produces the covered sound, which Nigel is looking for. Unfortunately, my wooden mute has gone for a walk, and in the present circumstance I can't go to the shop and get one, so you're going to have to humour me a little bit. But let's just try with a variety of different other mutes. Here's a simple rubber mute, a Tuart model mute, so that was interesting, you name a mute after a bow. That's very good, I like that. So we're going to put that as maybe a really good one. Let's go a little extreme with two kinds of practice mutes. One, a metal one. The reason I like the sound of the metal practice mute is that it chops out frequencies in the middle of the range, so you get quite a lot of the deep sound and this covering of the middle of the sound and this strange, curious little brilliance on the top. Now if I use this composite practice mute, it's got less character. That's my middle of the night mute that I use so the neighbours never know that I practice from midnight till 3. So I think what I'm going to use, it's a difficult decision, I think I'm going to use the metal mute for this. So let's get to the stuff of what I want to talk about. The previous session I talked about technical detail. What I want to talk about today is coloristic options. I won't be marking this up in detail today, but taking you through some of the things we can do. Interesting thing about this piece is it is basically a quiet fanfare, and it's based on a very limited amount of material, basically in various combinations, reductions, sometimes with added notes. This has the nature of a fanfare, and it's worth remembering that until the 18th century, the idea of imitating trumpets on the violin was absolutely normal, all the way from the fanfare works of the Bolognese violin composers such as Colombi and Vitali, which are always in D major. Interesting that usually on the violin, the trumpet in the 18th and 17th century is always in D major. It's the same in Walter, and of course the most obvious example is the Mozart D major K218 concerto, also in D major. But of course, come the 20th century, we have the association of the bugle with the last post, and so the idea of the quiet, the mournful fanfare, arises. And of course, with the subject matter of this, the tragic death of Edith Cavell, her execution in Brussels, that's what we very much have here. It's something, and halfway through the piece, you'll see there is an allusion. It says a letter G, that's on the third page. I'll put it up later. It says reminiscent of the last post. So we have a whole range of variations on this figure. So that's big. And that's the genius of it in many ways, is there's almost no more to it that. There's a mid. So the decision has to be, what are the range of colours that I can use in order, not to provide variety. Variety is one of the most overrated qualities in music making, but really to carry this melancholy meditation through. So obviously you could play it completely in the first position. Now my instinct would be not to do it the first time out, but for instance to go into a very, very simple thing, and then to third position. And my playthrough, I noticed I then went to the G string, did an extended fingering for that. And it makes good sense just to slightly vary the narrative for the second statement. Staying down maybe. That's slightly darker. Then we have this figure. So first position works well. Also, you notice up till this point there have been no open strings. Now we have one. Instinctively, this wasn't a decision. I balanced the open sound because there are two open strings there. This is based on the open GD and the open B flat F. It seemed natural to me to respond to that open sound with going up on the D string for the B natural, and the second, and then there's an echo. And that time I reversed the process, so I went up here on the first statement. This is the echo figure on. This is line 4. By the way, I've not said anything yet about the fact that these fingerings merely provide an opportunity for the bow to do its job. I'm going to come to that in a minute. So then, some more observation. That figure emerges so many times, and I almost don't want to talk about what I'm going to do with it later in the piece. We'll see what happens. Another technical device to say with the left hand is observation about the next figure, where we have this. You'll notice that the trill has been marked as a quarter tone trill. And the great thing about it is it gets away from the question of whether you're doing major or minor. If this was straightforward semitones, that becomes too literal. Obviously, if it's a tone, it's not going to work tonally. Suddenly that we're in Vaughan Williams territory there. Not that's a bad thing. But if I play a quarter tone trill, and particularly if you can either use a vibrato trill or a fingered one. So this was something that Schnick used very effectively in his memorial to Mozart, the wonderful string trio of the which is full of something very powerful about going from a quarter tone trill to a resolution with semitones. So this is particularly effective when you see what Nigel's done, put in a quarter tone trill. Here's a colour observation, which is, it would be tempting to play. This is the last line of the first page coming out of that second trill, but that's not what Nigel's looking for. He's looking for a kind of a turn or a gesture coming out of the trill, which is more like a sudden, almost like a stuttering. So what we do, we're in first position, step up one semitone, and we end up, the crucial thing is, it's that, I'm going to use the word, augmented tone that we have there from B flat, sorry, augmented unison that we have there from the B flat to the B natural, which is where the colour is. And it's wonderful if they are from adjacent strings, so you get a slight clash of the memory of this. If I play, particularly on the viola, that's a gesture which works better on the viola than the violin. Then we have the same figure again. I'm not going to play it. Then we have this rather Mahler 5 moment. All kinds of ways of doing that. Fingering ways, we can be up in position straight away. I can imagine some players would like to play. That could work very well. It doesn't really do it for me. But what is crucial is the fact that at the end of this march-like section, that we find an effective echo for. The arrival of this long repeated note at letter E means I can now talk about how the bow works in a piece like this and what we're looking for. Nigel has simply asked me all kinds of possibilities of where the colour is coming from there. Obviously, the bow placement, if I keep it, actually it might be even interesting to hear it, for instance, on the C string. If you're going to do that, you put letter E, the adagio up on the C string. That's something I've not considered before. And on this amazing viola, it really works very well. So that's dangerous to get to, but you can use the harmonic from the C. That's an interesting way of solving it, and coloristic is very interesting. If I go from the previous line, dangerous. One of the most interesting things about that gesture is the relationship between the if you like, what we call the kind of spun bow and vibrato. This is one of the few occasions where a unison note being repeated with slightly different pitches at the ictus of each note works very well. If you slow it down, you're actually getting that. And I find it's interesting if you say, well, you develop vibrato at the beginning of it, and as you come out of the mezzo di voce, the hairpin of this gesture, then you end up with very little. All the way through the piece, the way that the bow attacks, which is an odd word to use in a piece like this, the way that the bow attacks the string is interesting. So the opening, for instance, which we have these little sostenuto marks, the stress marks, always the question is going to be what consonant you're going to put on it. Do you want to let it a letter D, for instance, or the complete opposite, a hard K? I think you wouldn't do that. You might be looking for something more akin to a ch sound. All of these consonants come from how you manipulate the beginning of the stroke, which is, if you slow it down, is that. How much you control the amount of scratch and, if you like, non-speaking of the note before it speaks. And so that, for instance, what we're actually hearing if I slow it right down is that. And of course, this is drastically affected by where the bow is placed to, or because the interesting thing is, if I come close to the bridge, the string is stiffer, which means it speaks slower, which means you'll tend to get more of a hiss on the front of the note. And I would argue that for every single note of this piece, you are going to be exploring the different relationship with bow speed, where you are on the bow, for instance, if you play at the point, or the heel. And here we get into the fascinating contradiction about string playing, which is that we use all these different parts of the bow, all of these different bowings to do things, but actually the player should be able to do everything with any kind of bowing, any part of the bow, at any given notice. So effectively we have things which we say is like the down bow, up bow thing, where the down bow being stronger than the up bow. That's not because a player can't do it, it's more because it's easy to get to those sounds if we place them in a certain place. But for instance, if I take a sound at the tip, I should be able to produce out of the heel. And interestingly, when I do that at the heel, because in order to do it, I actually have to take the weight of the bow out of the string. It's got an interesting teetering quality, like someone tall trying to walk in very small shoes. The last thing I'd like to say is that this is a piece where all the preparation we do simply sets up the fact that you never know what's going to happen in this piece before you play it, because it's a piece about the shared experience of playing and hearing it. This is a place where in many ways you could argue the player is quite close to being a member of the audience. They're sharing this meditation, which for some people may be to do with the subject matter. Some people, especially if they're not British of a certain generation, won't necessarily relate to the subject matter. They will hear something else. So every time I've played it, and as I've said already, this is the first time I've played it for the viola, there's something very different. This is the first time I've ever played it, if you like, in public by myself, which is a very interesting experience, and it's teaching me a lot about what happens if I go and play it, for instance, in public in a certain kind of acoustic. You know, this is a piece that changes immeasurably when there is, for instance, if you play it in a very big echoey space, or the experience of playing it today is not that different from playing it in a kind of prison cell, which is interesting, bearing in mind the subject matter. So I'm now going to give some sort of performance of it. I think I'm going to move away from the metal mute. Having been excited about it initially, I'm finding it's limiting things. So I'm going to go to the rubber mute, this mute here, this little terz mute, which is not something I normally like. I don't really find them sympathetic, but with this instrument and this mute seem to like each other, and I'll take the bright red one off so they don't have a dispute.